To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Backyard Gardens podcast. It is another edition of our series in which we're going to talk about things to get your garden going in the right direction. All of these 5 episodes, we've committed to 5 now, we're on the 4th one, if you haven't known. They're all about getting your garden really all the pieces to the puzzle. So that's what we're here for. This is the Backyard Gardens podcast. If you want to support the show, do so by becoming a patron, becoming a subscriber, get yourself some seeds at our seed shop. Use the code YBBBB, discount available until February 15th, and free shipping year round, $35 more. We've got all kinds of varieties for you. So we look forward to getting you guys some special edition backyard garden seeds, and download the planner app. But that being said, Batavia, watering. I know I was editing a video the other day and we were talking and I was like, are you still hand watering? And you were like, dude, you know I am. And it made me laugh. Like every time I watch that little clip, it makes me laugh over and over. So we know where you sit with the watering.
It is funny because I spend more time during the growing season watering than I do anything else. More time watering than I do weeding. I mean, I guess, I was going to say, do I spend more time watering compared to planting? I'd say, yeah. And I'm going to go into the new growing season doing the same thing. Set here. Yeah.
And I mean, I've spent more time tweaking my watering system. And this is, it's funny you bring that up right off the bat because it's one of those things too that we really need to, I think, pay attention to is when we're talking about watering and how we're watering and stuff like that. Like the ease of watering is a big deal because if it's less friction. Mm-hmm. If you're having to work really hard to do it, there's a good chance you're going to miss your watering date. Yeah. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Well, absolutely. And I think that, so just to step back, if you are returning, when I say I'm going to keep on doing it the same way, what I mean. But if you're new, I hand water like 99% of the time. So I have a hose that I'm going by garden bed by garden bed, container by container watering. Generally speaking, I can water about once a week, depending on for my raised beds, maybe every 7 to 10 days ish. My containers require more. So that's the backdrop for me. Where young Ben actually has now a drip irrigation system, so that is a very different approach to watering compared to what I'm doing. And I don't feel like my method is superior. It's just what I do. And I'm, greatly intimidated by irrigation systems. It's composting and mice and then irrigation systems. Those are my fears in the garden.
Yeah, I don't think my method is superior either.
Actually, I do.
Okay, then yeah, my method's superior to you. No, I'm just joking. For me, it's superior than what I've done in the past, if that makes any sense. And that was, look, we're already 3 minutes in and we're kind of encroaching on getting off topic, but that was my garden design that caused that. But that being said, in your opinion, this is kind of a trick question. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you right off the bat, Batavia, what do you think the best way to water your garden is?
I think the good Lord raining down on us. I think that's the best water you're going to get to your garden. I think that most of us can't can't depend on that for the full garden season, that we have to add on to what he's given us. And there's a whole conversation that we won't fit into this episode when it comes to, plants that are more kind of drought tolerant than others. Places that really are in droughts year after year, right?
Well, you can go back to the variety episode, and that applies too. We didn't even talk about that, but that was in the
you absolutely varieties. Can,
yeah. So that was the correct answer. So ding, ding, ding. You're exactly right. And so it's funny because this year,
You know why I'm laughing. Yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah, I did a video and I was talking about how every time it rains, the garden just explodes in growth, and especially with thunderstorms and stuff like that. And I got a lot of flack from it, so I went pretty deep on it. And what I learned was the lightning in the atmosphere, doesn't matter if you see it or not, and this is a very elementary way to explain it, but it ionizes the water and basically allows the plant to accept more nitrogen, which it's also bringing from the atmosphere. So that's one of the things that really makes it so great. And you can't add that to your garden. Mm-hmm. You cannot. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't care if you capture water from your rain gutters or not. It doesn't matter. It's done at that point. Other than the chemicals, whatever, we're not getting into that subject, that are in the water, that is different. So right off the bat, don't grow your plants under a roof, in the summertime or whatever. I mean, that's the only way to combat that, right? Mm-hmm. But otherwise, there's a lot of different ways to add water. And, Batavia's touched on her method, and we'll expand a little bit on those. So we've got hand watering, and I've got a drip system, which in my opinion are like polar opposite ways to water. You could not get any farther from each other in water other than somebody being like, I don't water at all. So there is that. But what are some other ways to water? Well,
you can generally use any levels of sprinkling, like a sprinkler system, right? So that
easiest way too.
Yeah. That's probably, once you figure out the timing of it. Let me say it this way. You could put a sprinkler out, kind of drag it out and turning it on and turning it off. When I've used a sprinkler, so that other 1% of the time, I have it set on a timer. Some of these timers now, which are pretty reasonably priced, you can put on a rain delay if you want. So that's absolutely a way. I've not been crazy about that much overhead watering. I don't have any real evidence to say that it would be problematic in my garden. And because I still have some comfort in watering by hand, I've just leaned more into that. So that's another way. Do you have another beyond drip irrigation, hand watering, and then using sprinklers? Is there one more I'm forgetting?
No, not that I mean, hand watering kind of encompasses many different forms of manually bringing water to the garden. So yeah, I mean, sprinkler I think is the most common method, if you ask me. It's the easiest. You set it out, but we're not here to talk about like how to water your garden. It's the functionality of the water in the garden that we need to discuss. So what we know is water is the building block for life. Everything needs water, but when it comes in, other than, no water means desiccation of plants, anything like that. The question becomes, when you water, what is the water actually doing for the garden? And what it does is it allows a transport method for the nutrients inside of your garden to really go from one plant to the other, to the roots, however you see fit to say that. But it moves the nutrients around. But if we go back to our fertilizer one last week and we talk about that, you can have a nutrient deficiency in which your plant physically can't take up the nitrogen, or the water, excuse me. And so if you can't take up the water, you can't move the nitrogen. That's the big one that we're talking about here, the nitrogen, or, any other mineral or nutrient. But, you can have that occur within your garden. So we need to stay on top of that. And the mineral I'm referring to is calcium. If you have a lack of calcium, or even your pH is off, you can't transport this. So you could water all day long and you won't have that.
And sometimes we see something like a lack of calcium in, blossom end rot on tomatoes, peppers, melons in some cases. I think I've even seen it on some like winter squash. And commonly we tie it back to calcium deficiency, right? And one could argue that in some of those cases, it's not that there's not enough calcium for those plants to feed on, but it's more of those plants are having trouble actually sucking up that calcium. I wanted to say that differently, but here we are. I don't want the moment to miss me.
Hold on 1 second. Those two things, calcium deficiency and blossom end rot, are very confusing. They're like the same thing but different. They're so similar, but they go hand in hand. So
yeah, well,
but go ahead.
The argument is that one causes the other. The argument is what I said. So the reason why I said that your method is superior, and I was, beyond rain, right? I was speaking in general, not just superior to the method I use, not superior, just superior to sprinklers in general. It's because it provides, in my view, the most consistent watering, meaning consistent as in frequency and quantity of water. And I do believe that there is a issue that we sometimes don't recognize with, and I know you believe this firmly, in underwatering our plants. And we think we're giving it enough. And in some cases, I just don't believe that we are. It also goes back to what a good downpour will do for your plants. I look at that and just say just the quantity of water in a good downpour. Every rain isn't equal when it comes to obviously how much water is getting to those plants. So we don't do this often, brother. So you need to take advantage of when I'm saying something you're doing is superior. Let me give an explanation as to why.
Yeah. It's definitely got its downsides to it. It's definitely consistent 100%. But the consistency starts with the gardener before it starts with your watering method. So, in the level of consistency wise, though, I do think personally hand watering is the least consistent, then sprinklers, and then, your irrigation or your drip system. The reason why sprinklers can be inconsistent is because you get wind blowing, stuff like that. The plants will get big and block some of the water.
Absolutely.
All that. The drip system is underground, and I mean, you can plant right on a drip emitter, and basically every time you could be watering that plant as it's growing. So there's definitely a benefit to that. I don't really want to get into the drip system itself and all that. We can do that in another show or on YouTube or something like that, on my YouTube channel. But what I will say is it's definitely consistent. It's definitely helped a lot. But the other thing is it's also not as perfect as you would think. So the problem I have with it is the top layer of soil doesn't get a lot of moisture. So you're building roots further down, yes, but those feeder roots that come out, it's kind of tough, especially in a drought year. So
that's excellent.
You need to watch out for that. Yeah, and but you kind of go ahead.
I focus on, again, we're here. I focus on watering right at the root level, at the soil level when I'm hand watering.
Right.
I have the hose, the hose extension, and so I'm putting that right down at the plant level versus just watering the leaves of the plant and so on. So I try to account for that. But go on, because we're around in third here.
Yeah, we these are supposed to be short episodes, and Ben and Batavia can go long, but we need to really, and you hit on it, and we need to take a minute and talk about watering, the amount to water. I do have a firm belief. Batavia and I talked about this a couple of years ago personally, and we've mentioned it on the show a few times. I have a firm belief that as a whole, we focus on the 1 inch of water a week, and what we really are doing, especially in the summertime, is we're underwatering our plants. I do believe that, and I do believe also that it is very hard to determine how much to water with, you get a rain gauge. Okay, it rained an inch, whatever. But as a whole, I think it's very difficult. So we are definitely, I think, as a whole, watering not enough. What do you think?
I agree. And it's interesting you brought up the rain gauge. I actually have used that more so to say it didn't rain as much as I thought it did. Ironically enough, right? So I'm not going to suspend my next hand watering session because, we got a rain a day ago. It rained 2 days ago. And then on the rare occasion where I'm getting 4 or 5 inches, I'm still going around and putting my fingers in the soil to see, did it really saturate the garden beds or the containers. So in any of these methods, I believe there still is the diligence of the gardener that's necessary to check in with those plants to make sure at given times in the season they have enough water, right? That the soil isn't bone dry inches down, right? That your plants look healthy. They look like they don't look thirsty. You know, all of those are still your responsibility as a gardener.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to know too that, you know, just because you get a lot of rain, if you're in a drought and you get a heavy downpour, a lot of that rain can just wash right off your garden and not even penetrate the soil. So it's good to double check. And, you know, typically because I'm doing a in-ground drip system, I don't have to worry as much. And this is the big reason why I switched to it. I don't have to worry a lot about the leaves getting wet. So when it rains, if it's been dry, I just let it continue to water. I don't change anything at all, and it'll just get extra water given to it, because what we talked about here, we're not just talking about keeping your plants alive. We're talking about that nutrient delivery system. It's a highway for your nutrients to get to your plants, and that's what we're worried about here. And if you do that and you give it plenty of water, you will see that. And I mean, you have to judge. You know, I think the biggest damage to our produce is not underwatering or overwatering. I think it's inconsistent watering, because that's where you get cracked tomatoes, you get bitter cucumbers. Yeah, all that stuff, you know, and I mean, there's probably plenty more, but I think that's the bigger issue. So finding a way, meaning use a timer, you know, if you're hand watering, when you are hand watering, Batavia, what is it that you're doing to make sure that you're watering consistently at the same amount of water per plant?
It's more of a natural occurrence, right? So I used to do like a count in my head, like a 10 count or a 15 count.
I knew you'd say that.
And now it's just by feel, right? So I know I've been in this space for this amount of time, and I feel like that soil has been saturated with water, right? For my containers, I'm watching to see as water is escaping from the bottom, right? For my raised beds, I'm doing more of a 10 or a 15 second count. And I'm also conscious of which plants are in that particular space, because obviously the watering needs differ by plant. I was just sitting here and watching, and I know we're a bit over. I have a peace lily, which I actually call, you know, ironically, so a funeral flower. So the peace lily is one that is thirsty, and it's drooping, completely drooped over. It's so forgiving though. So I'm going to check the pot to make sure that it's not root bound, that I don't need to pot the thing up. I think it just needs water, and I can't remember the last time I watered it. It's going to bounce back and be just fine. Every plant in your garden isn't like that, right? There's some things that once you get to that level of drooping, and we're not talking about it's the hottest part of the day and a lot of the garden is drooping. We're talking about this thing has been thirsty. Some of those plants won't bounce back. Many will, but some won't.
But you can cause irreversible damage too. And first of all, I will have to say, Batavia, I like the way you're like, we're over, and then you go into a long story. It's classic Batavia.
That was my way
it's
of
awesome.
Apologizing for me continuing to talk, because that was my plan.
Yep. So, I, you know, counting, you know, all that stuff by feel, that's fine, whatever. I find that when I hand water, it's very inconsistent. But it's the timing and all that stuff. And if you overwater, let your plants dry out. The only time to really be very cautious of it is if you're getting a lot of rain at the time, or, you know, like we do, we get a lot of hurricanes, so we have to deal with that. But other than that, you know, I would water pretty heavily. I mean, for me, and we'll get into your watering schedule as we close out. My watering schedule in the summertime is every 3 days for 75 minutes my system runs. And then in the wintertime, like right now, it's probably once a week for 90 minutes it'll run. What about you, Batavia?
Yeah, I'm going to try to go back into the Wayback Machine. I think it was last summer was the last time I used a sprinkler. In the years before that, it was every 3 days, I believe, at like an hour total. Using an overhead sprinkler. When I water by hand for my raised beds, I'm watering about once a week, right? So that week could be 5 days, that week could be 7 days. For my containers, at the beginning of the season, it falls into that about once a week. As the season grows and the plants grow, the weather gets warmer or even hotter, I may be coming in for some of those containers watering every 2 days or even every day. So,
yeah, that's the downfall of containers where I live.
Absolutely is.
So there you go. Watering is a very important piece to the puzzle. And if you'd like to support the show, you can do so by becoming a subscriber, become a patron, buy some seeds. YBBBBB is, I'm trying to go fast, everybody, is a discount code. And we would love to ship you some seeds, and you can have a backyard garden. That sounds weird, but it's cool.
I like it a lot.
Yeah. And remember, everybody, we do two things on this show. We learn to grow, and we grow for change.
See ya.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Thanks for checking out the show. If you like what we're doing and you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at patreon.com/backyardgardens, or you can be an Apple subscriber, and in both of those, you'll get an extra episode every month. You can also make a one-time PayPal donation with the link below, and you can get all kinds of gardening gear like t-shirts and mugs and cups from the link below at Teespring, and we have an Amazon store which has all the products that we use and recommend in our gardens, and it helps support our show. And we also add to this list periodically, so be sure to check it out periodically to see if there's anything that you need for your garden. Everything that you do, including a like and a subscribe and even a review, will help us learn to grow and grow for change.
See ya.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.